I entered the suffocating cave and found what they left behind, but it was not what I expected. I can still feel the icy grip of dread pounding through me. I never should have opened that door. My heart raced as I stepped into the darkness, the cold rushing past me like a warning, whispering secrets of the void that lay ahead. The air was thick, heavy with an unsettling silence that screamed louder than any noise ever could that I had come here after hearing the stories, local legends of things left undisturbed, treasures and curses intertwined. My usual routine revolved around comfortable living, warm coffee, and the mundane buzz of daily life. But now, each cautious step forward felt like a descent into madness, far removed from the safety of my home. As I fumbled deeper into the cave, the shadows danced. The flashlight flickered. A mere flashlight was my only ally against the absolute darkness that seemed alive, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. The walls glistened with moisture, cold sweat of stone, and I could almost smell the ancient decay that clung to the air. I strained to listen, my breath a ragged whisper. I swear there were voices. Not whispers, but distinct murmurs echoing from the depths. Fear prickled at my spine, a sharp reminder that I was not alone. That I shook my head, trying to dismiss it, but the noises grew louder. A scuttling, was it an animal? Or something worse? My heart thudded. I could feel an unsettling presence, a weight in the air, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I stumbled over something soft, a pile of bones. My skin crawled as I realized those weren't just remnants of an animal, they were unmistakably human. My stomach tightened, knotting with sickening realization. Why were they here? What had happened? Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled. A resounding thud echoed through the cave, making me jump, my throat dry. What was happening? I glanced around, desperate to see something, anything, other than shadows. The soft chittering grew, transforming into an incomprehensible cacophony that clawed at my mind. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. All I could do was move, crashing through the oppressive darkness like a hunted animal, and then it appeared. A shadow looming, growing bigger as it stepped out, blocking my path. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. My feet froze, the icy tendrils of fear constricting around my throat. The whispering voices were now a deafening roar, drowning me in terror. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. My breath caught in my throat as the silhouette morphed in the shadows. It was elongated, not quite human, but not entirely monstrous. Its limbs were impossibly thin, sinewy tendons stretching beneath taut, pale skin. I could see glimmering eyes peering from the depths of its face, empty, hollow, and glistening like obsidian shards against the glum. Panic surged through me, igniting my instinct to run, but my body remained anchored to the cold, damp ground. The air thickened, and the stench of something rancid filled my nostrils, clawing at my sanity. The figure slowly raised a finger, stretching it toward me. The world around me shifted, the cave walls seemed to pulse, breathing, alive, echoing with distant cries that rattled my bones. I tore my gaze from the horror before me, forcing myself to move, to escape. The shadows flickered erratically around me, and I scrambled backward, nearly tripping over a jagged stone that jutted from the ground. I couldn't turn my back. The thing's presence was palpable, creeping closer, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. As I stumbled onward, the murmurs transformed into furious whispers, layered voices entangling together in a frantic chorus that clawed at the edges of my mind. They seemed to speak of loss, longing, the unending search for something hidden, a treasure perhaps? Or a nightmare waiting to devour me whole. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones. whatever lay behind me was no longer content to remain in the shadows, to be simply a frightful illusion in the dark. I blinked back tears as I stumbled down an incline, the earth giving way beneath my feet like the cavern was alive, plotting my demise. Rocks crumbled and slid, pulling me deeper into a world I no longer recognized. My flashlight flickered, the beam faltering, threatening to cast me into the abyss of darkness. With a frantic breath, I tried to steady it, but all at once, the cave erupted in chaos. Echoes ricocheted off the walls as if the very air had turned hostile. I glimpsed a shimmering figure dart past my peripheral vision, a flash of light or a trick of the mind? I swung the light back, illuminating a grotesque face, twisted and wretched. It was another being, its body contorted unnaturally, the skin stretched taut over jutting bones, lips peeling back to reveal jagged, glistening teeth. I turned to run, but my body felt sluggish, as if the very gravity of this place sought to keep me here. Every step seemed weighted, each movement was a struggle against a suffocating force. My heart raced as I passed a warped tunnel, the walls aglow with bioluminescent moss that pulsed to the beat of my frantic heart, and I pressed on, praying for escape, but the feeling of despair wrapped tighter around me. A frigid whisper grazed my ear, chilling my insides. "Stay with us," it breathed, each syllable dripping with malice. I could almost make out bits of their stories, their lost hopes echoing around me, tales of those who had ventured too far into the darkness, never to return. The whispers clawed at the edges of my sanity. Suddenly, a thunderous crash erupted above me, accompanied by a terrible rumbling. I looked up just in time to see a jagged boulder detach from the ceiling, plummeting toward me. In a split second, I dove to the side, a rush of air passing over my skin as it struck the earth, sending debris flying. My heart thrummed in my chest like a war drum, my survival instincts on high alert, but as I scrambled to my feet, a sense of finality washed over me. The shadows began to shift, swirling, forming a dense mist that surrounded me. I felt eyes, scores of them watching, waiting for my next move. There was no escape. I could feel their energy pulsating, a collective power that thrived on fear. A howl erupted, resonating through the cavern, a sound that spoke of hunger and desperation, and then, buried within the clamoring voices, I discerned something else, a clear, commanding tone that silenced everything else. "Join us." My heart raced, and I turned to find the shadowy figure once more leering at me, now closer. Its mouth stretching impossibly wide and the walls behind it shimmering with nightmarish reflections of souls entangled in darkness, their faces pleading, filled with despair. Just as I was about to scream, a cold, bony hand gripped my ankle, dragging me backward against my will, blending me with the shadows that hungered for my very essence. As darkness enveloped me, I realized with sickening clarity, I had stumbled upon more than just forgotten remnants. I had awakened something that should have remained dormant, and in my final moments, the last flicker of light blinked out as I was pulled into the heavy suffocation of the cave's grasp. The silence that followed was oppressive, a thick blanket smothering any remnants of sound that dared break the solitude of the cave. My mind buzzed with confusion as I fought against the paralyzing grasp that clutched at my ankle. Panic surged, each heartbeat echoing loud and frantic in the void. As I was slowly dragged back, reality warped and shifted around me. The walls swayed like a living entity, absorbing my terror. I was inches away from the creeping darkness that seemed to writhe with every pulse, every thrum of air disappearing into the unseen maw that hungered behind me. Just as I braced for the inevitable, the grip on my ankle loosened, and a rush of icy air swept through, compelling me to spring forward like a trapdoor had released. I stumbled and crawled wildly, my fingers clawing against the damp floor until they met the uneven stone, finding grip once again. Frantically, I turned to glance back at the consuming shadows, but they slithered away, retreating into crannies that I could not follow. Gasping, I leaned against the jagged wall, heart racing. Had I imagined it all? Had the cave created an illusion so profound that it manifested my deepest fears? I ran a trembling hand through my hair, heart hammering like thunder in a storm. And then, beneath the heavy silence, I heard it. The faintest of whispers was creeping from the corners of the cavern, overlapping in an ethereal melody that entangled with my thoughts. "Return, return." It echoed softly, almost a lullaby, yet the urgency clawed at my reality. I could feel it beckoning me, a sinister invitation creeping into my mind, pushing through the dread. I wiped my grimy palm on my clothing and proceeded deeper into the cave, compelled to seek the source of the voices that tugged at my very soul. The ground shifted beneath me. Irregular stones, damp and slick, felt unsteady, as though they were trying to throw me back against the darkness. Yet, I pressed on, my flashlight guiding me deeper into the murk. The shadows began to elongate with each flicker of the light which danced over moist rock. The walls turned from a bland gray to deep, vivid colors, pulsing against the darkness, imbuing the cave with a grotesque vibrancy. The walls bore witness to countless scratches and markings, desperate etchings of sorrowful figures reaching for something unseen. I froze, recognizing their twisted visages as reflections of turmoil, lament, and despair. My breath hitched as I realized that these were not mere drawings. They were the cries of those who had been lost, their stories imprisoned forever in the stone. Just then, the ground shifted again, this time more violently. A sudden quake reverberated through the cavern, sending loose rocks tumbling down, narrowly missing me. I stumbled backward, my light flickering ominously. A low, growling noise resonated from further deep within the cave, escalating into a cacophony of anguished cries as if the very earth had awakened, screaming at my intrusion. "Why are you here?" The words dripped from the shadows forming ahead of me, curling through the air like smoke. I squinted against the dark where the voices whispered from all directions, pooling into a silhouette that emerged, body strung tight in torment. The figure was grotesque yet undeniably human, a crumpled visage entwined with the cave's dark energy, agonized eyes boring into mine. "It's not safe." Its voice reverberated with a strange resonance, mixture of pleading and urgency. My pulse quickened as I appraised the writhing body that contorted unnaturally, a reality I hadn't wished to accept. "You are not meant to be here. Let me pass." I shouted, but the shadows only encroached tighter, closing in. The whispers longed to devour my strength. "Join us," they echoed, yet as the air thickened, I sensed a different urgency lurking within them, a desperate plea that sent shivers cascading down my spine. With every ounce of resolve I had left, I bolted forward, plunging deeper into the chaos. The shadows coiled around my limbs, holding fast, and just as I began to falter, I noticed a peculiar glimmer seeping through the suffocating darkness. Something almost a pulse beckoned me, vibrant against the oppressive gloom. As I approached, thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm, and I thrust my hands toward the light, desperate to grasp hold of whatever spark remained. But as I reached it, a piercing scream erupted from all directions, echoing in my ears like shattering glass, mingling with the unending whispers that swelled to a chorus so intense I faltered. In that moment of hesitation, the light flickered and spasmed as shadows enveloped me once more. They were no longer just an extension of the cave, but a living entity with a malignant intent. The last flicker of the glimmer vanished as darkness consumed my vision, and a chilling voice echoed, "You cannot leave." And I knew then, with a soul-chilling certainty, that the cave wasn't just a prison for lost souls. It was a sentient being, and I was about to become part of its endless torment. And before the darkness could claim the last remnants of my consciousness, a howl erupted that echoed even beyond the cavern, shaking the very ground beneath my feet. Then, silence fell. The silence that swallowed the cave felt profound and suffocating, like a weighted shroud pressing down on me. I became acutely aware of my own breathing, each exhale sounding like thunder compared to the immovable quiet that held the chamber. My hands shook uncontrollably as I realized this cleansing calm was perhaps more terrifying than the wailing shadows that had just threatened to engulf me. With every nerve ending alight in fear, I stumbled through the heavy darkness. Shadows danced around me, teasing the edges of my vision, but now they were hesitating, expectant, waiting, as if they were savoring my dread. My flickering flashlight illuminated patches of the cavern, revealing walls that seemed to breathe with me, inhaling the terror that wrapped around my heart. Every scrap of instinct screamed at me to retreat, to flee from the terrible abyss, but an eerie compulsion urged my legs forward, deeper into the remorseless complexities of the cave. My flashlight's beam lingered on the torment-laden scrawls on the walls, the faces of the tortured souls writhing in their eternal pursuit, their mouths stretched open as if still trapped in the soundless wails of despair. I could feel their story slipping through my fingers, the weight of their past pressing upon my soul, and then, I saw it a glimmer, weak and flickering in the distance, a stark contrast against the opaque mass surrounding me. Driven by an inexplicable force, I pressed on through the thick darkness, closing in on the light. With each step, the shadows seemed to coalesce, pushing back against me, their whispers rising exponentially, raucous and loud, the chilling chorus calling for me once more. "Join us, return," they coaxed, dripping with temptation and dismay, saturating the space like a dense fog that made it hard to breathe. I stumbled upon a large chamber, and there, illuminated by an eerie phosphorescence, stood a pedestal of stone. Atop it shimmered the blood-red gem, pulsating like a heartbeat. It was beautiful and terrifying, exuding an otherworldly aura that felt familiar, tugging at my memories. I was entranced, entrapped not by its beauty but by its throbbing promise of knowledge and power. Suddenly, from the corners of the room, spectral figures began to materialize, a cacophony of faded forms, their features blistered and twisted by time. They drifted toward the gem, their mournful eyes pleading, mouths agape in terror. Comparison took hold. I was again in their presence, their torment mirrored in my own bones. "Take it!" The shadows shrieked, their voices intertwining in a chorus of despair and hunger. "Accept the truth that we have found. Embrace it." As if my body was no longer mine, I stepped forward, the allure of the gem pulling me in like a drowning sailor to the surface. With trembling fingers, I grasped the pulsating stone, feeling its energy siphoning into me, the weight of centuries pressing against my chest like a cadre of souls demanding recognition and release. I gasped as a flood of visions overwhelmed my mind, glimpses of the past, of those who had come before me, each one swallowed by the obsidian pulse of the cave. "Remember," a voice implored, and I battled against the tide of memories crashing into my reality. The sheer volume of pain, betrayal, and regret threatened to distort my sanity. I was a voyeur to their suffering, yet unable to escape my impending doom. "Release us," they pleaded, their forms flickering in and out of existence as though they might disappear entirely into the shadows. "We are trapped in the cycle, just like you will be." Their cries crescendoed, a crescendo echoing through the vast cavernous space, and then the heaviness of darkness descended more significantly than before, a storm gathering in the pit of my stomach, the voltage of despair sparking through the air. Panic surged as I realized the cave was shifting once more, an unearthly growl erupting from within the stone itself in response to my acceptance of the gem. The shadows brimmed, swelling like a tide, dark forms converging, their faces twisted in rapture. Desperate for my energy and my essence, drained and delirious, I dropped the gem, watching in horror as it rolled to the edge of the pedestal, a final flicker of light illuminating the chamber before darkness descended once more. The shadows closed in, their whispers morphing into angry screams, demanding retribution as my vision began to whirl. And just when I thought I would be swallowed whole, a monstrous laughter erupted, filling the cavern, a voice I recognized, familiar and chilling. "You've awakened them, my dear," it said, the very stone under me vibrating with a palpable horror. "Now, let us relish the feast that awaits." I turned, desperation clawing at my throat, but before I could react, I felt cold hands clasp around my wrists, slippery and clammy, pulling me toward an immense gaping maw woven within the covering shadows, dark tendrils writhing and reaching, hungry for one more soul submerged beneath their depths. And just like that, as reality began to splinter, I was left on the brink, the very fabric of my being in peril, part of a nightmare from which there was no awakening. The laughter echoed around me, each reverberation sinking into the core of my being, a dissonant serenade that dripped with malevolence. My heart raced as I struggled against the icy grip of the hands clutching me. The shadows swirled tighter, drawing me toward the abyss, the gaping maw pulsating like a third eye, hungry for sacrifice. Spurred by primal instinct, I thrashed violently, trying to break free, but the hands felt like iron, their coldness seeping into my veins, freezing the very essence of my will. The cavern shook as if responding to my panic, the distant echoes of laughter morphed into a cacophony of tortured wails, a sonorous reminder of the souls trapped here long before me. Each cry felt familiar, snippets of stories I had unwittingly absorbed, friends lost, lives extinguished, all culminating in this moment. Let go! A spectral figure screamed, lunging forward from the throng of shadows. She had fiery red hair, eyes once bright, now clouded with despair. You'll only become one of them. In her gaze, I glimpsed the fading light of hope, empathy crumbling under the weight of dread. I realized she hadn't reached the gem, she was but another sacrifice, another glowing ember snuffed out in this relentless darkness. Run! She managed to scream before she was swallowed whole by the swirling shadows around us, leaving behind nothing but her haunting cry, echoing endlessly in the cavernous maelstrom. Why do you resist? The laughter twisted into a refrain that felt serpent-like, slithering through my consciousness. You belong with us. You were called for a reason. Instinctively, I strove to summon the courage hidden deep within me. Perhaps there was a way to escape the hunger of these ravenous shadows. It lurked somewhere in the memories I had touched when holding the gem, secrets whispered by the tormented souls. Straining against the shadows, I forced myself to think. With each heartbeat, I felt their presence encroaching, the panic surging like waves crashing against the shore of my resolve. The pedestal, the gem. It was my only hope of unraveling this enigma. If I could reach it, perhaps together, the stolen souls could fight back against their captors. With renewed determination, I focused all my energy, steering my body with primal urgency toward the outcropping of stone. I felt those hands slipping, their grip faltering as if sensing my defiance. The shadows screamed with rage, the sound sliced through the thick gloom, punctuating my desperate bid for freedom. I lunged forward, narrowly avoiding the tendrils that lashed out hungrily at my ankles. The gem lay glimmering, it seemed to pulsate in recognition, a heartbeat anchored in this cavern of torment. I grasped it, clutching it desperately, its warmth soaking through my fingertips, igniting an instinct buried deep in my marrow. Remember, the lamenting souls called, their cries merging into a desperate echo. You carry our past, wield it. With all the strength that remained within me, I unleashed the gem's energy, conjuring the memories of those whose lives had been swallowed here. A blinding white light erupted, pushing back against the encroaching darkness, starkly illuminating the figures around me. The shadows screeched in fury, their thrumming energy wavering against the light's onslaught. Faces of the lost appeared before me, rising like specters from the depths. They were warriors against the oppressive blackness, their souls shimmering with a restored sense of purpose. Together! I shouted, feeling the swell of their power harmonizing with my own, echoing through the chamber like thunder. The shadows recoiled, hissing like serpents as the light grew more fervent, but just as hope filled my chest, a violent tremor rocked the cave, sending waves of darkness crashing toward me. The spectral figures faltered, their expressions twisting into a mix of pride and sorrow, and understanding that this moment could break or redeem us all. I felt another presence behind me, looming with an aura darker than the void surrounding us. Foolish child. A voice growled, resonant with centuries of lingering malice. You think you can undo what has been written in blood? I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach as the source of the imposing shadow materialized, a gargantuan figure, cloaked in tattered rags that floated like smoke. Its eyes burned with eternal fury, glinting like coals in the depths of hell. As the figure stretched out a long, twisted arm, I was paralyzed. Let the feast begin, it hissed, ice-cold breath washing over me like waves before a storm, extinguishing the light in an instant. The energy of the souls cascaded around me, their anguish rising to a crescendo, battling to stay free even as the cavern dimmed once more. I could only watch in horror as the darkness folded in on itself, an immediate void where hope had flickered. With a final plunging silence, I felt my own essence being tugged, melding with the wails of the captured. The last thing I saw was that monstrous grin, shadowed in malice. Before the abyss swallowed us whole, my screams echoed against walls that had become my tomb, a frightful surrender to the very horror I sought to escape. And somewhere, deep within the dark, I felt hands, flawed hands, wrestling with their fate, pulling me closer to the heart of despair, binding my soul to its eternal cycle, beyond the brink of truth. The void enveloped me, engulfing my thoughts in a murky swirl of despair. For what felt like an eternity, I drifted through nothingness, suspended in a chilling limbo where time lost its meaning. The cacophony of cries, laughter, and wails merged into an unsettling symphony resonating in my mind, haunting me with echoes of those who had come before. It was in the depths of this despair that I felt the first sensation of solidity, a pulse, faint but persistent, reverberating through the dark. Gradually, I began to distinguish the shadows coalescing around me, twisting and warping into grotesque forms, spectral remnants of those long lost, eyes glinting with the dull ache of their own suffering. They reached out with bony fingers, as though attempting to grasp onto anything that still held the slightest hint of warmth, of life. "Join us," they whispered, their voices raspy and desperate. "We are the ones who stayed behind, who failed to escape." A cold rush coursed through me as I perceived their hollow sorrow. My heart sank, knowing I was teetering on that precipice, on the brink of being tethered to their fate. I had felt the tendrils of their despair attempting to latch onto me, but with the urgency of survival, I pushed back against the dark tendrils that sought to envelop me whole. "Leave me!" I cried out, summoning every ounce of strength. "I'm not like you." Yet the shadows only surged forward, their whispers twisting into an insidious chant. "You are one of us now. You cannot fight the darkness." In that dread-filled moment, something deep within me flickered, an ember of defiance reignited by the memories of those who had fought alongside me. I felt the energy of the gems still coursing through my veins, a flicker of warmth under the onslaught of cold despair. Summoning that spark, I forced my eyes open, and light erupted around me, illuminating the dark figures like a beacon. The spirits recoiled from the light, their expressions twisting into a tormenting blend of confusion and rage. I could see now that they were trapped, shackled by an eternal cycle of grief and loss, their forms writhing with the agony of their unfulfilled desires. "I will not abandon you," I shouted, my voice a rallying cry. "There is still a chance for redemption." As if responding to my words, a fraying thread of light wove through the throng, illuminating shapes that resembled those I had lost, faces blurred and indistinct but unmistakably familiar. Friends. Family. They formed a fleeting connection with me, their presence amplifying my resolve. "Fight back." I urged them through my heart, feeling their energy saturate the air, but the darkness was voracious. One by one, the shadows began to change forms, horror seeping into their features as they morphed into twisted caricatures of my loved ones. Their colors became virulent, stark against the pallid background of the cave. "Why do you resist?" they hissed in unison, their voices melding into a monstrous echo. "Join us, or be devoured." Panic clawed at my chest, but I clung to that scrap of light, feeling the surge of the gem pulsating at my core. The shadows struck, tendrils lashing out like whips, tearing at my resolve. I could feel the chill invading my heart, a profound sense of loss and hopelessness closing in on me. As I fought to hold on, I glimpsed a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision, a warped figure forming at the back of the cavern. It was the enormous silhouette from before, merging once more with the dark. "Your spirit is weak," it rumbled, a voice resonant with hunger, ghostly and haunting. "Give in, and all pain shall cease." "No!" I screamed, feeling the energy of my loved ones intertwining with me, just as the shadows uncoiled and lunged. I channeled their strength into one last desperate surge, sending a wave of brilliance cascading across the cavern, a defense against the impending onslaught. The light exploded outward, casting the cavern in a brilliance that momentarily held the dark at bay. Yet, as it was pushed back, I felt a looming presence surge above me, glowering with malice. The gargantuan figure lashed out, sending tremors through the ground, slamming a colossal hand onto my feeble shield. I braced for impact, feeling the energy falter beneath the weight of darkness. The gem dimmed. Just as the barrier crumbled around me, the shadows swelled, rising to consume the light. I sensed my spirit weakening, the tether of hope loosened like a fraying rope. Then, in a moment suspended between horror and despair, a piercing shriek shattered the darkness, a voice I had longed to hear. "Wake up!" it cried. The shadows hesitated, recoiling in fear as a figure emerged from the depths, a woman, her fiery red hair illuminated by the residual glow of the gem. Fight for your soul. Let go of the despair. Before I could process her presence, she reached out, ethereal fingers brushing mine, sending a jolt of energy coursing through me. Together, she urged, urgency pulsing through her voice, we can break the cycle. But as I grasped for her hand, my heart racing with anticipation, the monstrous figure lunged forward, dark tendrils reaching to violate the last flicker of light. Join us. It thundered, fury crashing like waves against an unyielding shore. In that final moment, just as the last remnants of brightness surged upward, the cavern collapsed in an amalgam of light and shadow, engulfing everything in darkness once more. A scream ripped through me, my heart racing, torn between the woman who knew my soul and the predator waiting to consume it, and as the crushing void encased me, I realized the true battle had only begun. The suffocating darkness clenched around me like a vice, an oppressive weight that threatened to crush my will. Within the encroaching void, memories flickered like dying stars, moments tangled with loss and sorrow. The warmth of the woman's touch lingered at the fringes of my awareness, but other, darker thoughts twisted around my mind, suffocating the remnants of hope she had ignited. Together, she had pleaded, but together meant vulnerability. The shadows whispered insidiously, tempting me with sweet promises of oblivion. The murmurs of the lost grew deafening, coiling around my thoughts like a serpent, squeezing tighter with each pulse of silence. Why do you resist? Their voices taunted, dripping with venomous mockery. Abandon your struggle. Embrace our everlasting embrace. I let out a strangled sob, imagining my loved ones lost in the shadows, their faces contorted with pain, longing, and despair. The woman's fiery hair flashed in my mind, a beacon against the encroaching nothingness. The faint glow of the gem may have faded, but the pulse of my heart remained tenacious, a stubborn fire flickering through the encompassing dark. Suddenly, the air shifted. A frigid gust swept through the cave, crawling like icy fingers over my skin. The shadows congealed, reforming into a shape more distinct, twisted specters writhing in an endless dance of agony. They moved as if pulled by invisible strings, choreographed chaos that bore witness to their torment, and soon their forms began to coalesce, sending shivers spiraling down my spine. Among the fragmented faces, I saw the unmistakable outline of someone I once knew. Sarah? I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. Her eyes glinted with a depth of sorrow that echoed my own, a brimming ocean of unfulfilled dreams. Please, you have to fight. We need you. Instead, she reached out with gnarled, skeletal fingers, her expression oscillating between yearning and malice. Join us, and the pain will fade. Let go, and we can be free together. Desperation clawed at my heart as swirling shadows encased her, distorting her figure into something grotesque. I could feel the darkness crawling through my veins, threatening to drown me in despair. No. I refuse. I cried out, straining against their pull. The cavern pulsed with life as I clawed to the surface of my thoughts, willing forth the warmth of the gem, drawing on the remaining flicker of its light. I could feel it straining, resonating against the tendrils of shadow binding me, thrumming with potential. Just as I thought it might explode forth, a deep rumble resonated through the cave walls, shaking the very foundation beneath me. Foolish mortal. The towering form materialized again, its monstrous visage towering above, a silhouette against the abyss. It loomed closer, roiling darkness spilling from its flaring eyes, consuming the space around it. Your defiance only prolongs your suffering. You cannot escape the inevitable. In that moment, something within me snapped. Anger surged, fueled by the indignation of being toyed with, sucked into their twisted games. You don't understand. I shouted, pushing back against the grotesque scenery of despair. I still have hope. With every ounce of faith and rage swelling inside me, I thrust my hands outwards, channeling the last remnants of the gem's energy. The darkness recoiled, staggering back at the strength of my defiance. The shadows shrieked, twisting and swirling violently, wanting to reassert their dominion over my spirit. For the briefest of moments, a shimmering path opened up before me, the image of Sarah flickering in and out like a broken signal, trapped well within the maelstrom of despair. "Don't fight it!" she screamed through clenched teeth, desperation laced with an unearthly resonance. "Join us. Just let go." But I couldn't give in, I wouldn't. For every face I saw, every entreaty made, I held on ferociously, harnessing the tide of light surging through me, intensifying as if to erupt at any moment. With a roar that shook the cavern to its core, I unleashed that warmth, casting it forth like a reckless devotion, illuminating the shadows swirling around me. The light chained them in place, their monstrous forms wailing and writhing beneath its brilliance, but I could feel their lingering essence clawing back, hungry for my soul. But in that blaze of clarity, something blinked just beyond the walls of light, a pulse, a flicker beyond the dark corners of my vision. I turned, and what I saw sent a chill down my spine, a door, a ragged opening, glowing faintly with a warmth both enticing and terrifying. Shadows swarmed around it, desperately gnashing and clawing to prevent its opening. "Do not be swayed. The door leads to despair." Sarah's voice reverberated in my mind, the fear tainting her plea. But the allure of that soft glow called out with promises of answers, of truths hidden within the shadows. And as the cacophony of wails crescendoed around me, I felt the monstrous figure press closer, the air thickening with the weight of its hunger, heart racing, choices weighing on me like heavy stones. I stood suspended at the threshold, paralyzed by uncertainty. Could I step through that door and find freedom, or was I simply courting my own destruction? Then, without warning, the floor quaked violently, and the ceiling began to crumble. Rocks rained down around me, and I had mere moments to act. The door pulsated, beckoning to me as the shadows clawed desperately at my ankles. The choice loomed: take a leap of faith, or be dragged into the abyss. Time blinked out, and as everything around me shattered, I leaped forward to the unforgiving depths of that glowing door. And in that fleeting heartbeat before the light consumed me, I heard the haunting whisper of the darkness, echoing with an insidious promise: "You were ours before, you will be again." The light enveloped me like a shroud, an overwhelming brightness that bit at my skin and clawed at my senses. In an instant, I was ripped from the crushing darkness of the cave and propelled into a space that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. I gasped for breath, the environment around me shifting and rearranging itself, blurring the edges of reality. I found myself standing in what appeared to be a disused house, its walls draped in the weight of dust and neglect. The air was thick with a staleness that clung to my lungs, and as I looked around, a shiver coursed through me. Faded photographs hung crookedly on the walls, each image capturing moments of joy that had long since withered under the weight of time. I felt a terrible loneliness seep into my bones, a gnawing emptiness that whispered loudly within the silence. Instinctively, I shuffled forward, compelled by a force as enigmatic as the shadows that had chased me. The room shifted, the familiar became twisted, as if the memories within the frame sensed my presence. Faces that had once looked alive and radiant now bore hollow expressions, their eyes dark and empty, voids gleaming with despair. I stumbled back as they seemed to gaze through me, their translucent mouths moving in soundless agony, pleading for liberation from their own haunting recollections. How could this be? I murmured to myself, the echoes of my doubt clashing against the whispers thickening in the air. My pulse raced as icy fingers trailed along my spine, urging me deeper into the house. A curiosity mingled with dread that I stepped into the next room, the door creaking ominously as I crossed the threshold. Here, time seemed to have warped, the floorboards were worn bare, and the wallpaper peeled away like dying skin. A table sat at the center, strewn with objects that felt significant but incomprehensible: old trinkets, broken toys, and a solitary, tarnished silver locket that glimmered in the dim light, promising stories of a world I no longer recognized. As I reached for it, a sudden chill brushed past my shoulder. The shadows coalesced in the corners of the room, swirling with an almost sentient hunger. "Do you see?" a voice rasped, disembodied yet intimate, wrapping around my awareness like a vine. What was left behind, the memories, they live still. I whipped around, eyes darting frantically, but the room remained still, reshaped by the presence that lingered just beyond sight. Yet, a heartbeat echoed in my ears, no mere illusion, but a rhythmic pulsing that seemed to sync with my very own. My heart raced madly, pounding as the voice continued. You have brought your pain here, and not simply your own. Do you not remember? Before I could respond, the walls pulsated. Panicked breaths echoed the weight of sorrow pressing me against the remnants of this haunted place. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing, when the air grew venomous, thick with dread. Flashes of distorted faces erupted from the shadows, their mouths working furiously as if caught in a scream, pleading for release that I felt as if the house was alive, feeding off the agony that had poured into it. The locket lay on the table, gleaming insistently, pulling at my thoughts. What were the secrets it held? A brutal choice tugged at the edges of my mind, the promise of revelation mingling with the terror of what lay within. Suddenly, the floor shifted beneath me, as if the very foundation was breaking apart. A chilling realization swept over me, I was not alone. The shadows had seeped into the room, thick tendrils snaking toward me like dark, hungry hands. Their anguished whispers grew in intensity, a cacophony of suffering clawing at the frayed edges of my sanity. Join us. They hissed, their voices echoing with a hunger that reverberated deep in my chest, a twisted invitation to surrender to despair, to double down on the darkness threatening to extinguish the last dregs of light. No. I won tea. I shouted, the locket clutched tightly in my hand. Yet, as I gazed at its surface, the reflection transformed, revealing scenes of women, all with fiery hair like Sarah, their faces obscured by the shadows of their own hidden grief. Pain emanated from the artifacts around me, desperation pulsating through the very fabric of this forsaken space. Then I heard her voice, soft yet urgent. You're in danger, remember who you are, you must fight. Just as I tried to respond, the shadows lunged forward with a terrifying speed, surging over the threshold like a wave determined to consume everything in its path. Desperation and fear intertwined. I could feel the suffocating grip tightening around my throat, choking me with despair. In that fragile moment of realization, the around me burst into a cacophony of screams, the darkness flooding in with an unrelenting hunger. I felt myself being pulled, drawn into the void spreading wide like a monstrous maw. Then, just as everything felt lost, an unwavering light ignited within my chest, the warmth of hope igniting against the cold jaws of the abyss. I channeled everything I had left into it, a luminous surge overpowering the darkness as I thrust my heart forward, seeking to escape the shadows, but the darkness howled, the weight of its anguish a thundering echo in my mind, you cannot resist forever. And as I leaped for the door, the shimmering portal of salvation, an icy grip seized my ankle, dragging me back into the depths. The shadows laughed, their voices harmonizing into a ghastly tune, you can never truly escape us. With one final desperate cry, I flung myself toward the light. But before I could touch it, a shattering revelation pierced my mind. An echo of my own lost memories surged forward, revealing truths I had never wished to see. A manic laughter enveloped me as the darkness swallowed my scream, releasing me into an endless night. And in that moment, I caught a fleeting glimpse of the woman's fiery hair, flickering out like a dying star, a haunting reminder of the choices yet to come. The suffocating darkness encased me like a reeking shroud, but the echoes of the house's agony followed me, intertwining with my very essence. I thought I had escaped, but I was wrong, the thick shadows were still wrapped around my soul. The moment I hit the ground, it shifted beneath me, the floorboards groaning like the unseen remnants of forgotten lives. I scrambled up, heart racing as I found myself once more in a cold chamber, an echo of the room I had left behind. This place stank of mildew and despair, but it was not silent. Whispers crept into my ears, coiling around my mind. You're still here. We've always been here, they cooed, their tones mingled with the hiss of static that distorted the air. I stumbled forward, following the dim glimmer flickering ahead, a tantalizing figure at the edge of perception. Sarah! I called into the void, desperation crackling through my voice. The shadows shifted, a subtle undulation beneath a weight that grew heavier with each passing moment, constricting like a serpent preparing to strike. An oppressive dread clouded my mind, rendering me weak as I pressed onward, compelled to find her. As I advanced, the air thickened, pressing against my skin with its unsettling chill. Flickering light revealed walls lined with mirrors, their surfaces warped and cracked, distorting reflections that were not my own. Disturbing images flashed before me, faces frozen in terror, bodies twisted in anguish, all present yet painfully just out of reach. My own reflection emerged in splintered fragments, eyes wide and clouded with fear. No! I want to become one of you. I shrieked, face burning with defiance as I turned from the mirrors, yet the shadows danced hungrily, an unseen audience eager for every display of my unraveling. They whispered promises of acceptance, but all I could hear was Sarah's voice, coaxing me from somewhere deep within the fabric of the darkness. You have to find me. You can't abandon me. Remember. Those 2 words rippled through the air like a wave of recognition, reminding me of the things I had tried to forget. I had to fight, I had to confront the horror that clung to me like a second skin. With newfound resolve, I pressed deeper into the haunting hall, the whispers escalating into anguished cries. Around me, the shadows merged and twisted, a living tapestry of despair. They were hungry, relentless, and ravenous for my fear. The light that had once flickered diminished with each wretched cry that tore through my mind. Shadows mocked me, answering my silent scream, "Why fight it? Join her, join us." I staggered into a vast chamber, where an altar sat nestled among the ruins, crafted from the remnants of the very materials that shaped the house's tainted history. Entangled in its grip lay a tattered diary, its pages crumbling but words still preserved in anguished ink. Heart pounding, I approached the altar, compelled to uncover the secrets buried beneath loss and despair. As I reached out to touch the diary, a shockwave rippled through the air, a roar that echoed deep within me, shattering the silence as dark figures twisted and broke free from their slumber. They surged forth, a malicious tide of suffering intent on reclaiming what I dared to uncover. I fought against the tide, pushing myself toward the diary, every ounce of my being screaming to grasp its knowledge. Just as my fingers brushed against the brittle cover, I heard it, the voice of the woman again, layered with urgency. "Please, you can't let them take you. The truth will break you." With a fierce resolve, I clutched the diary, its energy pulsing against my palm, offering a connection to forgotten lives that ignited a glimmer of understanding. And then, the shadows coalesced into a figure at the edge of the room, flickering with an energy far darker than I had ever encountered, the amalgamation of all the pain, despair, and secrets I had tried to escape. "Enough!" It bellowed, an echo that reverberated with anger and anguish. "You trespass in a world not meant for the living." In that moment, the tether to reality snapped. The chamber twisted around me, spiraling into chaos as the shadows surged forward, hot breath tickling my skin like venomous ivy. The walls turned liquid, the air crackling with raw energy threatening to crush every fleeting thought of survival. I was suffocating, breathless beneath the weight of despair, and then, amidst it all, I saw her, a flicker of fiery hair, the outline of a figure desperately reaching for me as she was consumed by darkness. "Remember, you must remember." Her eyes pleaded, and a single tear chased the curve of my clenching heart. "No! Sarah!" I cried, the realization crashing into me like an unyielding wave. Before I could comprehend the meaning, the shadows lunged, their collective hunger a crescendo, a final plea for my surrender. My heart raced as I gripped the diary tighter, an expectant energy thrumming with the possibility of revelation. But as I opened it, an explosion of raw force erupted, scattering the shadows, hungry screams distorted into a symphony of rage. "You cannot escape fate." And then, just as the light surged to meet the darkness, a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the chamber, freezing my blood. I felt the shadows grasp at me one last time, pulling me back as reality disintegrated into chaos. The last thing I heard, the sickening crunch of the diary folding in on itself, blank pages swirling into the void. I stood on the precipice of an unfathomable abyss, staring down into the churning mass of forgotten souls, teetering between salvation and doom. In that pivotal moment, I had one choice left, and the weight of the world pressed heavily against my chest. As the darkness unfurled around me, a newfound clarity broke through the suffocating haze. I wasn't merely a spectator in this hellscape, I was woven into its very fabric. This is where it all began, I whispered to myself, realization slamming into my chest like a sledgehammer. The chains binding me here were not solely those of the shadows, they were forged of my own memories, regrets, fears, loss. The diary clutched in my hands pulsed steadily, a heartbeat resonating with my own, that I felt the cave's malevolent breath tickling at my neck, the shadows lurching closer, their whispers morphing into a venomous chant. Join us. Return to the darkness. Their taunts blended with the haunting echoes of my past, images flashing before my eyes, Sarah, smiling and carefree, her laughter a balm to all that tormented me. I blinked away the tears, frustration and desperation contorting into a fierce resolve. I would not let this place steal her from me. Sarah! I cried out, the sound raw as it echoed in the void. I won't forget. I won't leave you. The shadows twisted, hissing in annoyance, a dark wave crashing against the light of my defiance. I raised the diary high, its cold surface now radiating warmth as memories intertwined with the truths buried within. I began to read aloud, each word igniting a flicker of hope, stirring the phantoms trapped in eternal lament. Once, we sought freedom, I read, my voice steady now, but we forgot one another, lost to despair, entrapped by shadows. The energy shifted, the weight of the darkness lifting as spectral faces began to form, emerging from the obsidian depths that haunted the cave. They reached out, eyes glimmering with a knowing spark of humanity buried deep beneath their sorrow. Together! I shouted, and the shadows recoiled, pushed back by the strength of collective memory. I felt it, a surge of light coursing through my veins, breaking through the siege of darkness that sought to reclaim me. The figures whispered, their cries weaving into a tapestry of resolve. Don't forget, they called, voices shimmering with hope. You are stronger together. The memory of Sarah burned within me, amplifying the bond that tethered us all, and then it struck a violent eruption, a cacophony of souls merging together, binding us in a bittersweet harmony. I channeled every ounce of love, every moment shared, every ounce of my existence into the diary, its pages igniting like flames that consumed the shadows. You are not alone. I screamed now, the echoes resonating in the cavern, the luminescence soaring to heights I hadn't thought possible. The shadows twisted and shrieked, recoiling as the light expanded, revealing their grotesque forms in all their horror, twisted remnants of lives snuffed out, souls entwined in anguish. A deep darkness writhed, exposed to the light, and I knew in my core that this was the source, the manifestation of every agonizing memory, every regret held tightly within me and affecting the very fabric of this reality. Let go! I shouted, hurling the diary into the abyss, where it landed with a heavy thud. The shadows twisted violently, their cries shifting from anger to desperation. You don't understand. They shrieked. You cannot escape what you are. But as I held on to the warmth of Sarah's memory, I realized the truth. They were right. I couldn't escape what I was, but I could redefine it. Then join me. I declared, fierce and wild, holding fast to the light. The cavern shook violently as shadows converged, and in that moment, I felt it, the pressure of thousands of hands pushing against the walls of their existence. They were desperate, unwilling to release their pain, but I refused to buckle under their weight. That I, in one final act of defiance, I surrendered to the love that pulsed in my chest, a radiant orb of golden light exploding from within me, tearing through the darkness as it cascaded across the cavern, enveloping everything it touched. Shadows writhed and twisted, their forms fragmented, echoing the torment of their existence, but I reached out, heart open, unyielding. Together, we broke. Through I saw faces, heard laughter mingle with cries, one last gasp of vibrancy before the void collapsed inward. A scream of fury erupted from the shadows as they disintegrated, their cries echoing until they faded into silence. The light engulfed all, engulfing the darkness, the agony, the suffering, until I stood there, alone. That I blinked beneath the crystalline expanse above, the echo of the cave consumed within the light. Yet, just at the periphery, I caught a fleeting glimpse, a fleeting red glimmer of hair that entwined with the fading shadows. There was Sarah, a smile disarmingly radiant against the remnants of the darkness. Remember, her voice whispered softly, echoing against the corners of my mind, that I knew then, the horror was never fully defeated. It lay in wait, lurking in the recesses of every shadow, but I had learned to redefine it. And as I stood beneath the unbreakable vault of the sky, the suffocating memories merged with the warmth of hope, forever altered but never abandoned. The battle was never truly over, but then again, neither was the light. It wasn't a victory, it was a promise, a testament to love's refusal to be consumed, echoing eternally in my mind. I understood the chilling truth: darkness was just a heartbeat away.